Karen turned my house into firewood. My $2 million lawsuit just sent him to state prison. The chainsaw stopped. My 100-year-old oak lay in pieces across my lawn, sap still weeping like blood. You had no permit for that tree, Karen Voss said, arms crossed, smiling like she'd done me a favor. I stood in my driveway in my bathrobe, coffee shaking in my hand, staring at the wreckage of 40 years. My grandfather planted that oak. Karen didn't know that. Or maybe she did, and that's exactly why she cut it. This is HOA property now, she said. You signed the covenant. Section 14, subsection C, read the fine print. I hadn't read the fine print. Nobody reads the fine print. That was about to change forever. My name is Elias Bellamy. I'm 43, a structural engineer, and until that morning, a mild-mannered man. I moved into Willowbrook Estates 2 years ago for the quiet. I got Karen Voss instead. She'd been HOA president for 6 years, ruling the cul-de-sacs like a queen with a clipboard. Neighbors whispered about her, but nobody fought back. Fines piled up. People just paid and moved on. I wasn't going to move on. Not this time. Not after the oak. I photographed everything, the stump, the chainsaw marks, the smug look on Karen's face as she walked away. That night I couldn't sleep. I opened my laptop and started a folder. I named it Evidence. I didn't know yet that folder would one day sit on a prosecutor's desk. The next morning, a new notice appeared on my door, a $500 fine for unauthorized landscaping debris. The debris was my tree. The one she cut down. She was fining me for her own crime. I called the HOA office. A tired assistant named Priya answered, voice flat with exhaustion. Karen handles all disputes personally, Priya said. Good luck with that. Something in her tone told me Priya had seen this show before, many times, with many victims. I decided right then, I would document every single interaction, word for word, date for date. 2 weeks earlier, Karen had fined my neighbor Doris $300 for a garden gnome violating aesthetic uniformity. Doris was 81. She cried on her porch. Nobody helped her. I hadn't helped her either. Now I understood. Guilt is a powerful motivator when it finally meets its own reflection. I started attending every HOA meeting, sitting quietly in the back, taking notes on my phone. Karen ran meetings like a courtroom where she was judge, jury, and always, conveniently, innocent. 026:001. Wait, let me restart clean. My oak was gone. My fight was just getting its roots. I hired a lawyer. Her name was Renata Cole, sharp-eyed, unimpressed by HOA bullies, hungry for a real case. Get me the covenant, Renata said. Get me the bylaws. Get me every fine she's ever issued. I filed a public records request. Karen's assistant stalled me for 11 days. That delay was evidence too. When the documents finally arrived, something jumped out immediately: the tree removal was never HOA approved. Karen had signed the work order herself, using a fake vendor account she controlled. She'd paid herself, through a shell landscaping company, for cutting down my own tree. I sat back in my chair, stunned. This wasn't overreach. This was fraud. Renata's eyes lit up reading the paperwork. Elias, this isn't a neighbor dispute anymore. This is a crime. I still needed more. Karen was clever, and cleverness like hers always built an escape hatch. So I started talking to other victims, quietly, carefully, one porch conversation at a time. Doris admitted Karen once threatened to foreclose her home over unpaid fines for a birdbath. A young couple, the Nguyen's, said Karen blocked their pool permit for 8 months, no explanation given. Every story had the same shape: petty rule, inflated fine, no appeal, humiliation guaranteed. I built a spreadsheet. Fines by month. Vendors paid. Karen's shell company kept appearing, again and again. Renata subpoenaed the HOA's bank records. The paper trail led straight to Karen's personal account. "She's been skimming for years," Renata said. "This is bigger than Firewood, Elias. Much bigger." I should have felt triumphant. Instead I felt sick, thinking of how many people she'd crushed quietly. Karen, meanwhile, had no idea I was building a case. She thought I'd already folded. She even smiled at me at the mailbox. "Lovely weather for cutting more brush, don't you think?" I smiled back. "Can't wait to see what grows next," I said and walked away calmly. That night I filed a formal complaint with the state's Department of Consumer Affairs. 2 days later, an investigator named Marcus Webb called me. "We've had complaints about her before," he said. My stomach dropped. Before? How many befores had there been, buried and forgotten? Marcus asked me to keep gathering evidence quietly. "Don't tip her off," he warned. "She'll destroy records." I nodded even though he couldn't see me nod. I understood the stakes now. Karen posted a new HOA newsletter that week. Community harmony starts with compliance. I almost laughed out loud. Under Compliance Spotlight was a photo of my empty stump, captioned, "Before and After, Progress in Action." She turned my grief into her propaganda. That was the moment my anger became something colder, sharper. I stopped feeling like a victim. I started feeling like an engineer studying a structure about to fail. Karen's whole operation, I realized, was a load-bearing wall of lies. One good crack and it would collapse. Renata and I mapped a plan: legal, financial and public. 3 fronts, 1 target. "We're not just suing her," Renata said. "We're going to take away everything she built her power on." I looked at the stump outside my window and made a promise. Karen would learn what loss really felt like. 2 months into the investigation, Karen grew paranoid. She started demanding board members sign new NDAs. One board member, a quiet man named Frank Dutton, refused. Karen forced a vote to remove him. Frank came to me privately. "She threatened my mortgage insurance through the HOA lien," he whispered. I recorded that conversation, with his permission. Another brick in the wall we were building. Marcus Webb confirmed Karen had been under 2 prior investigations, both quietly closed for insufficient evidence. Insufficient evidence, I thought. She'd simply never faced someone who refused to stop collecting it. Karen raised HOA dues by 15%, citing landscaping restoration costs, my tree, again, funding her lifestyle. Residents grumbled at the meeting. Karen silenced them with practiced ease. "Rules exist for a reason," she said. I filmed that meeting on my phone, hidden in my jacket pocket, capturing every smug word. Afterward, Doris squeezed my hand. "Someone has to stop her," she whispered. "Please, someone has to." I told her, quietly, someone already started. That night, I discovered the twist that changed everything. Karen wasn't even legally the HOA president. Her 3-year term had expired 14 months earlier. No new election had ever been held. She'd been ruling as an imposter, an unelected tyrant hiding behind expired paperwork the whole time. Renata could barely contain herself. Every fine, every fee, every lien, potentially void, Elias. Every single one. I felt something shift inside me, not just anger now, but the cold thrill of impending justice. We requested the original election records. Karen's office claimed they'd been lost in a flood. There had been no flood. Willowbrook hadn't seen rain in 6 weeks. Another lie, cracking under pressure. Marcus Webb's investigators subpoenaed the county archive instead. The original ballots still existed, untouched. The real winner of that expired election, records showed, had been Doris, my elderly neighbor with the gnome. Karen had quietly discarded the results and declared herself the winner by unanimous board consensus. Doris hadn't even known she'd won. She just remembered being told there was a small paperwork issue. I sat with her on her porch and told her the truth. Her hands trembled around her teacup. That woman stole my presidency, Doris said, and then fined me for a garden gnome in my own yard. The irony was almost poetic. The rightful ruler of Willowbrook had been paying fines to the usurper. Renata filed an emergency motion to invalidate every HOA action taken under Karen's illegitimate leadership. That included every dollar in dues, every fine, every so-called violation notice for 6 years running. Karen was informed by certified letter. I wasn't there to see her face, but I imagined it well. She responded within hours, not with an apology, but with an emergency HOA meeting, mandatory attendance. I walked in that night knowing something was about to break, one way or another. Karen stood at the podium, composed, dressed sharper than usual, like armor against what was coming. There has been some confusion, she began, regarding recent administrative matters. I want to clarify the facts. She spun the expired term as a technical oversight and blamed the county for clerical negligence. Nobody in the room believed her anymore. You could feel the air changing, the fear leaving the crowd. Frank Dutton stood up. Karen, did you or did you not personally profit from tree removal services? Silence swallowed the room. Karen's smile faltered for the first time I'd ever seen. That is a baseless accusation, she said, but her voice cracked on the word baseless. I stood up next, holding a folder thick with receipts, bank statements and shell company documents. I have the vendor invoices, I said. Paid to Voss Landscaping Solutions LLC. Registered to your home address. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Karen's hand gripped the podium like it might keep her upright. This is a private financial matter, Karen snapped. You have no right to bring this here. I have every right, I said. You cut down my grandfather's tree to line your own pocket. Doris rose slowly, cane tapping the floor. And you stole my presidency to keep doing it. Karen's eyes darted between us, calculating, searching for an exit that no longer existed. This meeting is adjourned, she announced abruptly, gathering her papers with trembling hands. No, Frank said firmly. By HOA bylaws, adjournment requires board majority. You're not even on the board. The room fell into stunned silence, watching a queen realize her throne had never truly been hers. Karen stormed out without another word, heels clicking sharply against the community hall's tile floor. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt only the beginning of something much larger unfolding. Because 2 days later, Marcus Webb called with information that would change the entire scope of the case. Elias, he said, the shell company isn't just for landscaping. We found payments tied to a burn permit. A burn permit. My stomach turned cold. Karen hadn't just cut my tree down, she'd sold it. Records showed my 100-year-old oak had been chopped, hauled away and sold as premium firewood. Sold under a business license Karen created using my address without my knowledge or consent. She hadn't just destroyed my property. She'd profited from destroying it, twice over, laughing the whole time. Renata's jaw tightened reading the report. This just became felony fraud, Elias. Grand theft, actually. I thought of my grandfather's hands, planting that sapling decades ago, believing it would outlive him. Instead it had become kindling in some stranger's fireplace, sold for profit by a woman who never apologized. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the stump with a flashlight, staring at the rings inside it. 94 rings. 94 years of quiet growth, cut down in an afternoon for a few $100s. I promised that stump justice would cost Karen far more than she ever profited from it. The following week, Marcus Webb's team executed a search warrant on Karen's home office. Neighbors watched from behind curtains as investigators carried out boxes of files and 2 laptops. Karen stood on her lawn in silk pajamas, screaming about privacy rights to anyone who'd listen. Nobody listened. The tide in Willowbrook Estates had finally, unmistakably, turned against her. Inside those files, investigators found something none of us expected, a second shell company entirely. This one wasn't for landscaping. It was for emergency maintenance contracts billed directly to the HOA. Karen had been approving her own invoices for repairs that were never actually performed. Roof patches. Gutter cleaning. Fence repairs. All paid, all fictional, all funneled back to her personally. 6 years of dues, inflated and diverted, hidden behind spreadsheets nobody questioned until now. The total, Marcus estimated, exceeded $300,000 in fraudulent HOA billing alone. Add my tree, add the falsified election, and the case had grown teeth nobody anticipated. Renata filed our civil suit that same week: fraud, conversion, breach of fiduciary duty, and emotional distress. We demanded $2 million in damages, restitution, punitive damages, and every dollar she'd stolen. Karen hired a lawyer named Todd Radner, slick and overconfident, who called our claims wildly exaggerated. "My client is a pillar of this community," Radner said to the local news. "This is a smear campaign." That quote aired the same evening the county released the falsified election ballots to the public. Local news ran both stories side by side. The pillar of the community looked more like rubble. Doris agreed to speak on camera, calm and dignified, describing years of quiet intimidation. "She fined me for a garden gnome," Doris said, "while stealing the election I actually won." 141:001. Public sympathy shifted overnight. Willowbrook residents who'd stayed silent for years suddenly found their voices. 17 more residents came forward with stories, fines, threats, liens, and quiet humiliations, one by one. Karen's lawyer tried damage control, offering to voluntarily step down in exchange for dropped charges. We refused. Stepping down wasn't justice. Stepping down was just another exit ramp for her. "She doesn't get to walk away," I told Renata. "Not after everything she's taken from people." Marcus Webb agreed. The state was building criminal charges independent of our civil case entirely. Grand theft. Fraud. Falsifying government records for the fake election filings she'd submitted. Karen's world, brick by brick, was collapsing exactly the way she'd once collapsed other people's lives. And then came the twist none of us saw coming, not even Marcus, not even Renata. Priya, Karen's tired assistant, walked into Renata's office one morning with a flash drive in her hand. "I kept copies," Priya said quietly. "Every email. Every order." I was scared to come forward, until now. Karen had threatened to fire Priya, then blacklist her from every property management job in the county. Priya had endured it silently for 3 years, terrified, until she watched Doris speak on the news. "If she can be brave," Priya said, "so can I." The flash drive contained emails where Karen explicitly discussed cutting my tree to teach him a lesson. A lesson. That's what she called destroying 94 years of growth. A lesson in obedience. Another email revealed Karen had specifically targeted homeowners who questioned her, a pattern, not an accident. I wasn't the first. I was simply the first who refused to stay quiet about it. Renata submitted the flash drive to both the civil case and Marcus Webb's criminal investigation. Karen's lawyer requested an emergency closed-door meeting, sensing the walls closing in completely. We refused that too. Some fights don't get resolved quietly behind closed doors anymore. The state formally charged Karen Voss with felony fraud, theft by deception, and falsifying public records. Her mugshot ran on the local news that evening, the same smug expression frozen in pixels. Doris watched it with me on her porch, laughing for the first time in months. 94 rings, she said. That tree outlived a lot, and it's about to outlive her presidency too. I hadn't told her about the rings. Somehow, word of that detail had spread through the neighborhood. People started leaving small wooden markers near the stump, tiny handwritten notes of solidarity and support. One read, "For every fine, a root grows back stronger." I didn't know who wrote it, but it stayed. Karen, out on bail, avoided the neighborhood entirely, holed up somewhere none of us knew about. Radner tried one more move, a motion to dismiss based on insufficient chain of custody for evidence. The judge denied it in 11 minutes. The email trail was airtight, time-stamped, and independently verified. Marcus Webb told me privately, in 15 years, I've rarely seen a case this clean, Elias. Clean wasn't the word I'd have chosen. Painful. Overdue. Necessary. Those felt closer to the truth. The civil trial date was set. Karen would face both a jury and a judge, simultaneously, on separate fronts. I spent nights rehearsing testimony with Renata, going over every date, every document, every quiet injustice. Stay calm, she told me. Let the paperwork do the shouting. You just tell the truth. On the morning of the trial, I walked past the stump one last time before heading to court. Someone had planted a small oak sapling right beside it, a tiny defiant promise of renewal. I didn't know who planted it. I liked to think Willowbrook had planted it together, quietly, as one. Inside the courtroom, Karen sat beside Radner, dressed modestly now, stripped of her usual polished armor. She glanced at me once, briefly, and I saw something I'd never seen from her before: fear. The prosecution called witness after witness: Doris, Frank, Penguins, Priya, each one steady and unshaken. Each testimony added another beam to the structure I'd been quietly building for over a year. When it was my turn, I described the morning the chainsaw stopped and my tree lay in pieces. I described the fine she issued for her own crime and the newsletter mocking my empty stump. She didn't just take a tree, I said. She took the idea that rules exist to protect people. Radner cross-examined me aggressively, searching for cracks. I had none left for him to find. Isn't it true, he pressed, that you personally profited from this lawsuit through public attention? No, I said calmly. I profited from finally telling the truth. That's not the same thing. The gallery murmured. Even the judge allowed himself the smallest flicker of a smile. Then Renata played the recording of Karen's email: "Cutting his tree will teach him a lesson." The jury's faces hardened in unison, watching the mask fully fall away in real time. Radner objected repeatedly, each objection weaker than the last, each one denied without hesitation. By the third day, even Karen's own expression had shifted, from defiance to something like defeat. The prosecution's closing argument was simple: this wasn't governance. This was a 6-year abuse of power. Renata's closing argument was sharper still: she burned his family's history for pocket change and called it policy. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. 6 hours that felt longer than the 2 years leading up to them. When they returned, the foreperson stood, paper trembling slightly in her hand, and read the verdict. We find in favor of the plaintiff on all counts. The courtroom exhaled all at once, a collective breath held since the chainsaw first started. Damages awarded, $2,100,000, covering fraud, distress and punitive penalties combined. Karen sat motionless, staring at the table, the number apparently too large to fully comprehend. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Doris stood beside me, gripping my arm, grinning ear to ear. 94 rings, she whispered again. And she couldn't even survive 2 years of scrutiny. But the civil verdict was only half the reckoning. The criminal trial followed 3 weeks later. This time, Marcus Webb's evidence took center stage: the shell companies, the fake invoices, the forged ballots. Karen's public defender, since she could no longer afford private counsel, offered a plea deal. The state refused anything short of real prison time. Too many victims. Too many years of harm. The trial lasted 8 days. Priya's testimony proved the most devastating, calm and utterly damning. She told me if I ever talked, she'd make sure I never worked in this county again, Priya said. The jury took less than 4 hours this time. Guilty on all 7 felony counts. Karen Voss, once the self-appointed queen of Willowbrook Estates, stood as the judge read her sentence. 12 years in state prison, with restitution to every victim she'd defrauded across 6 years of rule. She turned toward the gallery once, searching for sympathy. She found none. Not even from Radner. As bailiffs led her away in handcuffs, she looked smaller somehow, stripped of every ounce of power. I felt no joy watching her go, only a quiet, exhausted relief that finally, this was truly over. Outside, Doris hugged me tightly. "You did it, Elias. You actually did it." "We did it," I corrected her. "Every single person who finally spoke up did this together." The HOA board dissolved within weeks, replaced by an elected committee with Frank Dutton as interim chair. Doris was formally recognized as the rightful president from years earlier, though she declined to serve again. "I've had enough of committees," she laughed. "I just want my gnome and my garden back in peace." The stolen dues were slowly redistributed to residents, funded partly by the seized shell company accounts. My settlement, once finalized, was substantial, though no amount of money regrew a 100-year-old oak. I used part of it to plant a small grove of oak saplings along the community's shared green space. A plaque beside them read simply, "For every tree taken, may 10 grow stronger in its place." Priya found a new job in property management 2 towns over, this time with an honest company. She sent me a card that read, "Thank you for making it safe to finally tell the truth." Frank Dutton rewrote the HOA bylaws from scratch, adding term limits, transparency audits and appeal rights. "Never again," he said at the first real board meeting, "will one person hold this much unchecked power." I still walk past the stump most mornings, coffee in hand, watching the small sapling beside it grow. It's barely 2 feet tall now, fragile and green, nothing like the giant that once stood there. But it's mine, planted with intention, growing under rules nobody can quietly bend or exploit again. Sometimes Doris joins me on those walks, cane tapping softly against the sidewalk, still grinning. 94 rings, she says again, like a mantra, like a reminder of what patience and evidence can do. Karen Voss remains in state prison today, her name a quiet warning whispered in HOA meetings nationwide. Her legacy isn't the power she wielded, but the courage she accidentally inspired in everyone she wronged. I learned something in all of this: silence is the only thing tyranny ever truly depends on. The moment enough people refuse to stay quiet, even the smallest cul-de-sac queen falls hard and fast. My grandfather's oak became firewood in someone else's fireplace, but its roots, it turns out, ran far deeper than she knew.